The director of Sunset Meadows Assisted Living had kind eyes but a firm handshake, the sort that apologized without wavering. Thomas Brennan stood in the hallway outside his former room, former as of 17 minutes ago, with a red leather suitcase at his feet and 81 years of life reduced to what could fit inside it. The February wind rattled the facility's glass doors behind him, impatient. "Mr. Brennan, we've extended your account as far as we can. 3 months past due is our absolute limit." Thomas nodded because what else could he do? His pension check arrived faithfully at $2,800 each month. Sunset Meadows cost $4,500. The math had been broken from the start, but he'd believed, foolishly, desperately, that his children would help bridge the gap. Rebecca made partner at her Boston law firm 2 years ago. Michael's tech company went public last spring. Emma had tenure at the university. They were busy people with busy lives, and he'd been too proud to ask directly until the call stopped going through entirely. "I understand. Thank you for your patience." The director's expression softened with relief that he wasn't making a scene. Thomas lifted his suitcase, heavier than he remembered, though he'd packed light, and walked through those glass doors into air so cold it felt like inhaling broken glass. The parking lot stretched before him, mostly empty in the mid-afternoon lull. His 1997 Buick sat near the back, engine block probably frozen solid after sitting unused for 6 weeks. He'd stopped driving when his license renewal required a vision test he couldn't pass without admitting. He needed new glasses he couldn't afford. The suitcase handle bit into his palm. Each step across the salted pavement reminded him that his right hip hadn't been the same since the fall last October. 81 years old and being evicted from an old folks' home because he was too poor to die with dignity. His wife, Catherine, would have had sharp words about this situation, about pride and family and asking for help before it came to this. But Catherine had been gone 19 years, breast cancer swift and merciless, and Thomas had spent those years convincing himself he was fine alone. A car horn blared. Thomas looked up to see a silver Honda pulling into the lot too fast, tires spitting slush. The driver's door flew open before the car fully stopped, and Emma stumbled out, her coat unbuttoned and her eyes already red. "Dad! Oh God, Dad, I'm so sorry." She crashed into him with enough force that he had to plant his feet to keep from falling. Her arms wrapped around his shoulders, and she was crying, actually crying, her whole body shaking with it. Thomas stood there holding his suitcase in one hand and patting at her back awkwardly with the other. Because what comfort could he possibly offer when he was the problem? "It's all right, sweetheart. It's just all right." "It's not all right. I should have called back. I should have." Her voice broke. She pulled away, swiping at her face with her sleeve. At 37, Emma still had her mother's gentle features and that same way of looking at him, like she could see straight through to the parts he tried to hide. "Richard and I are separating. I can't, Dad, I can't afford to help right now. The lawyers, the house, everything's frozen until the divorce is final." Thomas had met Richard Chen exactly twice. Once at their wedding 8 years ago, once at a strained Thanksgiving 5 years back. A cardiac surgeon with careful hands and a careful smile. The kind of man who measured his words like medication doses. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" Emma's laugh came out sharp and broken. "He was sleeping with a nurse at the hospital for 2 years. 2 years, Dad, and I was so busy with my dissertation and teaching that I didn't even notice." Behind Emma, Thomas could see movement in her car's back seat, a small face pressed against the window, watching. Dark eyes wide with the particular wariness of a child who'd learned that adults couldn't be trusted to keep their world stable. "Is that Lily?" Emma turned, seemed to remember her daughter existed. "Yes, she's been staying home from school. Anxiety, the counselor says, but I think she just knows something's wrong and doesn't understand what." She looked back at Thomas, and something shifted in her expression, calculation mixing with desperation. "Dad, I need to ask you something. I know the timing is awful. I know you just lost your place, but I don't have anyone else." The wind picked up, carrying the smell of snow from the clouds gathering overhead. Thomas waited. "There's grandfather's old estate in Maine. Riverside, that little coastal town. You inherited it when he died, right?" Thomas hadn't thought about the Ashford Manor in years. His grandfather had left it to him 15 years ago, along with a property tax bill that arrived like clockwork each April. $2,000 he paid without question, maintaining ownership of a place he'd never visited as an adult. His grandfather had bought the estate in 1948 for almost nothing, a stone mansion built by some industrialist in the 1890s, grand and rotting in equal measure. As a boy, Thomas had spent 3 summers there, running through gardens that seemed endless, exploring rooms that smelled of old wood and older secrets. I haven't been there since I was 12. But it's still standing? Still yours? According to the tax assessor, yes. Emma's hands twisted together, a gesture she'd inherited from her mother. Could you go there? Live there? Because I can't take you in right now, not with the divorce and Lily and everything falling apart. But if you had somewhere to go, somewhere that's yours. She trailed off, the request hanging incomplete between them. Thomas looked past her to the car where Lily sat small and scared, and he thought about being 81 with nowhere to go and no one who could take him in without it being a burden. The Ashford Manor was probably condemned by now. 50 years of neglect could reduce even stone and steel to ruin. But it was shelter, and shelter was more than he had 5 minutes ago. I'll go. Relief flooded Emma's face so completely that Thomas realized how terrified she'd been that he'd refuse. Thank you. Thank you, Dad. I'll help you pack your car. We can... Emma. He stopped her with a hand on her arm. Can Lily come with me? The relief vanished, replaced by confusion. What? Just for a few weeks, while you sort things with Richard, the drive up to Maine, getting the place livable, she could help. Keep an old man company. Dad, you just lost your housing. You're about to live in an abandoned mansion. I can't... Where else can she go? You said yourself she's anxious, staying home from school. Maybe a change of scenery would help. Fresh air. A project to focus on instead of listening to her parents fight through lawyers. Emma opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Her gaze drifted back to the Honda, where Lily sat perfectly still, the way children do when they're trying to be invisible. She has nightmares. Wakes up crying almost every night. I'll take care of her. You're 81. I'm aware. They stood there in the parking lot while snow began to fall in small, mean flakes. Thomas could see Emma doing the math in her head, childcare costs versus court dates, her daughter's well-being versus her own survival. It was an impossible equation with no good answer. Finally, Emma whispered, just until I get things sorted. A month, maybe 6 weeks. However long you need. Emma walked back to her car, opened the rear door, and crouched down to speak with Lily. Thomas couldn't hear the words, but he watched his granddaughter's face cycle through confusion, fear, and something that might have been hope. After a moment, Lily nodded. She climbed out, clutching a purple backpack to her chest like armor, and Emma guided her over to stand in front of Thomas. Lily, you remember Grandpa Tom? The girl looked up at him. 10 years old, rail-thin, with her mother's dark hair cut short and practical. She'd been 6 the last time Thomas had seen her. Emma's wedding, where Lily had been a flower girl in a white dress, scattering petals with solemn concentration. 4 years was a long time in a child's life, long enough to forget or to remember only the vague shape of a person rather than the person themselves. Hi, Grandpa. Her voice was so small, so carefully controlled. Thomas knelt down, ignoring the complaint from his hip, until they were eye level. Hi, Lily. Your mom says you might want to come on an adventure with me. We're going to fix up an old house. It's probably a mess, definitely cold, and there's a lot of work to do. But I could use a partner, someone smart and brave. Think you're up for it? Lily looked at her mother, then back at Thomas. Is it scary? The house? Probably a little. Old houses usually are. But we'll be scared together, which makes it easier. She considered this with the seriousness of someone 3 times her age. Can I bring Mr. Patches? She held up the backpack, and Thomas could see a stuffed rabbit's ear poking out of the top. Mr. Patches is absolutely invited. Okay, then. And just like that, Thomas Brennan had a traveling companion for a journey he hadn't planned to take. Emma helped transfer Lily's things, 3 garbage bags of clothes, a box of books, a tablet with a cracked screen, into the Buick's trunk. She wrote down her cell number, her lawyer's number, and the number for Lily's counselor, pressing the paper into Thomas's hand like a talisman. Then she hugged her daughter for a longer time, whispering things Thomas couldn't hear. and drove away with tears streaming down her face. Lily stood next to the Buick, watching her mother's car disappear around the corner. She didn't cry. She just held Mr. Patches tighter and waited. "Well then," Thomas said, "let's see if this old beast still starts." The Buick turned over on the third try, engine coughing blue smoke into the February air. Thomas let it warm up while Lily climbed into the back seat and buckled herself in without being asked. He adjusted the rearview mirror car and caught her reflection. Small face, careful eyes, hands folded in her lap. A child learning too young that the world was unreliable. "You ever been to Maine?" "No, sir." "It's cold, colder than here. The ocean's there, though, and pine trees. Lots of pine trees." "Okay." Thomas pulled out of the Sunset Meadows parking lot for the last time and pointed the Buick north. The drive to Riverside would take about 6 hours if the weather held, 8 if it didn't. He had $180 in his wallet, a quarter tank of gas, gas, and a granddaughter who'd been abandoned into his care by a daughter who'd run out of options. The only thing waiting for them was a house that might not have a roof anymore. But it was something. It was forward motion. And forward motion was all Thomas had left. They drove in silence for the first hour, Lily watching the landscape change through her window, while Thomas navigated onto I-95 North. The radio worked intermittently, catching fragments of news and weather reports that predicted heavy snow by evening. Thomas kept the heat running at full blast, but the Buick's heater had never been strong, and he could see Lily pulling her coat tighter. "There's a blanket in the trunk. Next time we stop, we'll grab it." "I'm okay." She wasn't okay. Thomas could see her shivering in the mirror, but he recognized the stubbornness there, the determination not to be a burden, not to ask for anything. He'd worn that same expression for years after Catherine died. By the second hour, they'd crossed into New Hampshire. The landscape grew hillier, forest pressing close to the highway. Lily had been silent since they left, but now she spoke up, voice uncertain. "Grandpa Tom, why doesn't Mom want me anymore?" The words landed like a punch. Thomas had to take a moment before responding, keeping his eyes on the road because looking at her would crack something inside him. "Your mother wants you very much. She's just going through something difficult right now. When adults' lives fall apart, sometimes they need space to put the pieces back together. It's not about you. It's never about you. But she sent me away." "She sent you with me? That's different. She trusts me to keep you safe while she handles grown-up problems that kids shouldn't have to worry about." Lily was quiet for a long moment. "Are you mad at her? For making you take me?" "No one made me do anything. I wanted you to come." "Why?" Thomas glanced in the mirror and found Lily looking back at him, those dark eyes searching for lies. He owed her honesty at least. "Because I've been alone for a long time, and being alone gets heavy after a while. I thought maybe we could help each other. You keep me company. I keep you safe. Partners." "Partners?" Lily repeated, testing the word. She seemed to accept it, settling back into her seat with Mr. Patches held loosely against her chest. "What's the house like?" "I don't know anymore. I haven't seen it since I was about your age. My grandfather bought it cheap after World War II. Big stone place with lots of rooms, gardens in the back, a conservatory with glass walls, or at least that's what I remember. It's probably falling apart by now." "Are there ghosts? In old houses?" "Always. I'm not scared of ghosts." "Good, because they're usually more scared of us than we are of them." They stopped for gas in Portland, Maine, just as the snow started falling in earnest. Thomas pumped $20 worth of fuel while Lily used the bathroom, and when she came back, her face was pale. There was a man in the parking lot. He was yelling at someone on his phone about money. It scared me. Thomas looked around but didn't see anyone obviously distressed. "The world's full of angry people, sweetheart. Most of them aren't dangerous, just loud. But you did the right thing, noticing and being careful. Mom says I worry too much. Your mom's going through a hard time. Sometimes people say things they don't mean when they're drowning." Lily considered this while Thomas retrieved the promise blanket from the trunk. She wrapped it around herself in the back seat, and for the first time since they'd left, she looked almost comfortable. The final stretch to Riverside took them off the highway and onto smaller roads that wound through dense forest. The snow fell harder now, fat flakes that accumulated on the windshield faster than the wipers could clear them. Thomas had to slow to 30 miles an hour, leaning forward to peer through the white curtain descending over everything. His hands ached from gripping the steering wheel. "Are we lost?" Lily's voice carried an edge of fear. "No, just driving careful. GPS says we're close." The GPS was lying or confused. They passed the same intersection 3 times before Thomas spotted the turnoff, a narrow road barely plowed, marked by 2 stone pillars that rose out of the snow like ancient teeth. No gate, no sign, just those pillars standing sentinel over a driveway that disappeared into the trees. "This is it." Thomas turned the Buick onto the property, feeling the tires crunch over ice and frozen gravel. The driveway wound for half a mile through bare trees that pressed close enough to scrape the car's sides. Snow had drifted across the road in places, and twice Thomas had to back up and take another angle to push through. Lily was silent in the back, but he could feel her tension like a living thing. Then the trees opened up, and the Ashford Manor revealed itself. Thomas stopped the car, engine idling, and stared. The house was worse than he'd imagined, worse than his darkest expectations. The stone facade rose 3 stories, dark gray walls stained almost black by decades of weather. Most of the windows were broken, leaving jagged holes that stared like empty eye sockets. The grand entrance steps were buried under snowdrifts. The fountain in the circular driveway held only ice and dead leaves. Ivy and vines had invaded the walls, forcing themselves between stones, and sections of the roof had clearly collapsed. Thomas could see sky through holes where slate tiles should have been. The whole structure looked like something mortally wounded, still standing through stubbornness alone. "Grandpa?" Lily's voice was very small. "This looks like a haunted house." "Yeah," Thomas agreed, "it really does." A car horn made them both jump. Thomas looked in his rearview mirror to see a black Mercedes pulling up behind them, far too expensive for the setting. The door opened, and a man climbed out, mid-60s, wearing a cashmere coat over what looked like a custom suit. He had silver hair styled with product and the kind of face that smiled with his mouth but not his eyes. Thomas rolled down his window. Cold air and snow rushed in. "Mr. Brennan?" The man walked up to the Buick, hands in his coat pockets. "I'm Richard Ashford. I've been trying to reach you." The name registered dimly. Thomas had received letters over the years from various Ashfords contesting the property transfer, claiming the original deed was invalid, demanding he sell. He'd ignored them all, filing them away with the tax bills because the property was his, legally his, and he wasn't interested in selling. "What do you want?" Richard's smile never wavered. "I represent the Ashford Historical Society. This property rightfully belongs to the Ashford Family Trust. Your grandfather's acquisition was—" He paused, choosing words carefully. "Questionable. I'm prepared to offer you $50,000 cash, today, right now. Take the money, walk away, and we'll handle the legal mess." Thomas looked at the mansion. Condemned, dangerous, probably structurally unsound. 50,000 would keep him housed for years. Could pay for Lily's education maybe. Give Emma something to help with her divorce. It was the smart choice, the practical choice. But Richard Ashford's smile was condescending, the expression of someone who expected to be obeyed. And there was something in his eyes when he glanced at the house, hunger, calculation. This wasn't about history or family legacy. This was about something else. "I have the deed. My grandfather inherited this property legally. That deed is questionable at best. I have lawyers who, then let them write letters. I'm keeping the property." Richard's smile finally cracked. "Mr. Brennan, please be reasonable. Look at this place. It's a death trap. You're not seriously planning to—" He noticed Lily in the back seat, and his expression shifted to something almost horrified. "You brought a child here? Are you insane?" "That's my granddaughter, and she's none of your business." "She is absolutely my business if you're endangering her. This structure is condemned. One strong wind and those walls could collapse. I could call Child Protective Services right now." Thomas felt Lily shrink down in the back seat, trying to disappear. Something hot and protective surged through his chest. "Get off my property. I'm giving you 1 week. Richard pulled out a business card, set it on the Buick's hood, where snow immediately started covering it. 1 week to reconsider my offer. After that, I'll pursue legal action. And I will win, Mr. Brennan, and I always do. He walked back to his Mercedes, climbed in without looking back, and drove away. His tires spun on the icy driveway, fishtailing slightly before finding purchase. Then he was gone, leaving only tracks in the snow and a business card turning white. Thomas sat gripping the steering wheel, breathing hard. Behind him, Lily whispered, "Is he going to take me away?" "No," Thomas made his voice firm, certain. "No one's taking you anywhere. We're staying here. This is our house now." But he said it's dangerous. Lots of things aren't dangerous. We'll be careful. Thomas put the car in gear and drove the rest of the way up to the mansion's front entrance. Up close, the damage was even more apparent. Yellow condemned "Do not enter" signs were nailed to the doorframe. The massive oak door hung partially open, one hinge broken. Through the gap, Thomas could see only darkness. They sat in the car with the engine running and the heat blasting, neither moving to get out. "What if we can't fix it?" Lily asked. "Then we'll figure out something else. But we have to try first." "I'm scared, Grandpa." "Me too, sweetheart. But being scared and being brave aren't opposites. Being brave means doing the thing even when you're scared." Lily absorbed this, then nodded. She unbuckled her seatbelt and clutched Mr. Patches tight. "Okay, let's be brave." They climbed out of the Buick into wind that cut straight through Thomas's coat. The temperature had dropped further, probably 20 degrees, maybe less. Snow swirled around them in small cyclones. Lily's teeth were already chattering. The front door resisted when Thomas pushed it, wood swollen from moisture. But eventually it scraped open far enough for them to slip through. They stepped into the entrance hall and stopped. Thomas had remembered grand. He'd remembered elegant. What greeted them was devastation. The two-story entrance hall stretched before them, ceiling lost in shadow. The chandelier that had once hung from the ceiling lay in pieces on the marble floor, surrounded by broken glass and rubble. Paint peeled from the walls in long strips, revealing water-stained plaster underneath. Snow had blown through broken windows, creating drifts in the corners. The curved staircase to the second floor was missing several steps, and the banister had collapsed in sections. The smell was overwhelming. Overhauling. Mold, rot, and animal waste. Something had been living here, possibly still was. Thomas could see nests built in corners, droppings scattered across the floor. Lily pressed against his side. "Grandpa, I don't think we can stay here." Thomas wanted to agree. Every instinct screamed that this was impossible, that Richard Ashford had been right, that they should take the money and run. But he thought about Sunset Meadows, about having nowhere else to go, about Lily needing somewhere safe while her parents destroyed each other through lawyers. "Let's look around first. Find one room that's livable, just for tonight." They moved deeper into the house, feet crunching over debris. Thomas had a flashlight in the car. He'd grabbed it when they stopped for gas, and its beam cut through the darkness, revealing glimpses of what had once been beautiful. Carved molding, marble fireplaces, built-in bookcases, all of it rotting, collapsing, surrendering to time. The parlor, furniture covered in mildewed sheets, floorboards warped from water damage. The dining room, table still set for a meal never eaten, chairs overturned, a chandelier hanging at an angle. The library, shelves still lined with books, most ruined beyond saving, but the smell of old paper mixing with decay. They found the kitchen at the back of the house. It was slightly better, stone floor, less water damage, an old cast iron stove that might still work. The back wall had windows that were mostly intact. A door led to what must have been servants' quarters. Thomas opened the door and found a small room, maybe 12 by 12 feet. The ceiling was intact. The single window still had glass. A narrow bed frame with a destroyed mattress stood against one wall. "This," Thomas said, "we can make this work for tonight." They brought everything in from the car. Lily's bags, Thomas's suitcase, the blanket, the few supplies they'd bought at the gas station. Thomas cleared debris from the floor, checking for holes or weak spots. The structure seemed solid here, stone and thick walls that had withstood decades better than the rest of the house. The temperature inside was barely warmer than outside. Thomas could see his breath. Lily was shivering violently now, her lips tinged blue. We need heat. Fire. There was a fireplace in the kitchen. He'd seen it. Thomas went back with the flashlight and examined it. The chimney might be blocked, but there was only one way to find out. He gathered fallen boards, broken furniture, anything that would burn. Lily helped, carrying smaller pieces, her hands already red from cold. They built a fire in the kitchen fireplace, and Thomas used the last of his lighter fluid to get it started. The wood was damp and fought against burning, but eventually flames caught and spread. Smoke rose. Most of it went up the chimney, some of it didn't. They'd have to live with it. Thomas dragged the bed frame into the kitchen, positioning it near the fire. He laid out their sleeping bags on top of it, made a nest of blankets. Lily climbed in fully clothed, including her coat, and burrowed down with Mr. Patches. Is it going to be like this every night? Thomas sat on the edge of the bed frame. No, we'll fix things. Make it warmer, safer, but tonight, we just survive. I'm hungry. They'd eaten nothing since morning. Thomas checked their supplies. 2 granola bars, a bag of chips, 3 bottles of water. He split 1 granola bar with Lily, and they ate in silence while the fire crackled and popped. The chips he saved for tomorrow. Darkness came fast. Thomas fed the fire, keeping it burning because if it went out, they'd freeze. The temperature in the kitchen rose slightly, from lethal to merely miserable. Lily curled into a ball in her sleeping bag, and Thomas lay next to her, both of them shivering despite the layers. Grandpa, tell me a story. What kind of story? One with a happy ending. Thomas thought about that. Happy endings felt distant right now, theoretical. But Lily needed something to hold on to, some promise that things could get better. Once upon a time, there was a house that everyone thought was dead, but inside it, sleeping, was a heart that wouldn't stop beating. The house waited for someone brave enough to find that heart and wake it up. And when they did, the house remembered how to be alive. Is that a true story? We'll find out. Strange sounds echoed through the mansion as night deepened, creaking boards, settling stones, the wind finding passages through broken walls. Thomas heard something larger moving on the floor above, footsteps too heavy to be imagination. Lily heard it too. She pressed closer to him. What is that? Just the house settling. Old buildings make noise. But Thomas had seen something earlier, something he hadn't mentioned to Lily. In the entrance hall, in the dust and debris, there had been boot prints, fresh ones. Someone had been here recently. Someone might still be here. He kept that fear to himself and held his granddaughter while the fire burned low and the mansion groaned around them. At some point, exhaustion won over discomfort. Lily fell asleep first, her breathing evening out. Thomas lay awake longer, listening to every sound, jumping at shadows. Tomorrow they'd explore more, find out what they were really dealing with, figure out if this was survivable or if Richard Ashford's offer was the only rational choice. But tonight, in a freezing servant's room in a dying mansion, Thomas Brennan and his granddaughter slept because there was nothing else they could do. Morning came with pale light filtering through dirty windows. Thomas woke stiff and cold, every joint protesting. The fire had died to embers. His breath misted in the air. Beside him, Lily was still asleep, curled so tight she looked half her size. Thomas climbed out of the sleeping bag carefully, trying not to wake her. His hips screamed as he stood, 81 years old and sleeping on a bed frame with only fabric between him and metal. Smart, he restarted the fire using the last of their burnable debris. The flames caught slowly, reluctant. While it built, Thomas went to explore the kitchen properly in daylight. The cast iron stove dominated one wall, massive, ancient, probably from the 1920s. He opened the front. Inside was surprisingly clean. Just dust and old ashes. The gas line would need checking. Probably hadn't been used in 50 years. The sink was there, porcelain stained brown but intact. Thomas turned the tap, not expecting anything. Water coughed out, brown, then rust-colored, then finally running clear. He let it run while he searched cabinets. Most were empty or filled with mouse droppings. One held ancient canned goods, their labels faded to nothing. Another held cleaning supplies so old the bottles had started to corrode. But water ran, that was something. A sound made him turn. Lily stood in the kitchen doorway, wrapped in her blanket, watching him. Her hair stuck up at odd angles, and there were tear tracks dried on her cheeks. She'd cried during the night, and he hadn't woken. "Morning, sweetheart. I don't like it here." "I know. Can we leave?" Thomas moved to kneel in front of her, ignoring his hip's protest. "Where would we go?" Lily didn't have an answer to that. She looked at the floor, at the walls, anywhere but at him. "I miss Mom. Want to call her? Will she answer?" "Let's find out." Thomas pulled out his cell phone, one bar of signal. He dialed Emma's number and put it on speaker. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. Emma's voice, bright and professional. "You've reached Emma Chen. Please leave a message." Lily's face crumpled. Thomas ended the call without leaving a message. He held her while she cried, small hiccuping sobs that broke his heart. When she finally quieted, he wiped her face with his sleeve. "Your mom loves you. She's just overwhelmed right now. But we're okay. You and me, we're okay." "Are we?" "We will be. First step, breakfast. Then we explore this place properly. See what we're dealing with. Sound like a plan?" Lily nodded, sniffling. They split the second granola bar and drank water from the tap after letting it run clear. Not much of a breakfast, but better than nothing. Thomas made a mental list: food, heat, money, in that order. They had maybe $160 left. It wouldn't last long. After breakfast, they began exploring the ground floor systematically. Thomas had the flashlight. Lily stayed close to his side. The mansion revealed itself in pieces, grand rooms in various states of decay, evidence of past lives preserved in dust and neglect. They found the library on the east side of the house. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, most of the books ruined by water damage, but some sections had stayed dry enough to preserve their contents. Thomas ran his fingers along spines, histories, novels, technical manuals. His grandfather had been an educated man. Lily wandered to a window looking out at what might have been gardens once, right, Jim? "Grandpa, what's that?" Thomas joined her. Through the dirty glass, he could see the conservatory, or what remained of it. A glass structure attached to the back of the house, most of its panels shattered, the metal framework rusted and collapsing. Inside, the skeletal remains of plants that had frozen decades ago. That used to be a conservatory, a greenhouse, for growing plants year-round. "Can we fix it?" "That's a big job, sweetheart. Probably too big for just us. But maybe. They continued exploring. The dining room with its frozen meal, the parlor with sheet-covered furniture, a music room with a piano that had collapsed in on itself, keys scattered across the floor like teeth. Every room told a story of abandonment, of people who'd left in a hurry and never came back. In the library, Thomas noticed a desk pushed against the far wall, heavy mahogany, carved with intricate details. He tried the drawers, more out of curiosity than any real hope of finding something useful. Most opened easily enough, empty or containing rusted paper clips, old pens that had dried out decades ago. The bottom right drawer stuck. Thomas pulled harder, feeling something give way inside. The drawer scraped open with a shriek of wood against wood, and inside, wrapped in oilcloth that had protected it from the worst of the moisture, was a bundle of papers. Thomas lifted them carefully. The oilcloth crinkled as he unwrapped it. Inside were letters, thick cream stationery, yellowed with age but still legible. The top envelope was addressed to Mrs. Victoria Ashford at this address. The return address was overseas, military postal codes from World War II. "What is it?" "Letters. Old letters." Thomas opened the first envelope carefully. The paper was brittle but intact. "My dearest Victoria," it began, "France is not what we expected. I cannot tell you where exactly, but know that I am well and thinking of you always." Thomas read through several letters while Lily watched. A story emerged. William and Victoria Ashford had lived here. They'd had 2 sons. When the war came, both had enlisted. The letters were from William, writing to his wife from the front, full of love and longing and the careful optimism of someone trying to keep darkness at bay. Then a letter dated November 19 more, its tone different. "My darling, I received word today that I cannot bring myself to write. Thomas was killed in Belgium 3 weeks ago. I only learned of it now." Thomas stopped reading aloud. Lily was looking at him with wide eyes. "Someone died?" A long time ago, during the war. That's sad. Yes, it is. Thomas rewrapped the letters carefully and placed them back in the drawer. A family had lived here, loved here, lost here. Victoria and William Ashford. Their son Thomas, the same name Thomas carried now, killed at 19 in a war fought an ocean away. History pressed down on him, the weight of other people's grief mixing with his own. Lily had moved to explore on her own, running her hand along the bookshelves. Suddenly she stopped, pushing against one section of shelf. "Grandpa, this moves." Thomas went over. The shelf she'd found did move. Not much, but enough to notice. He pushed harder, and a section of the bookshelf swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing a gap. Behind it was darkness. "What is it?" "I don't know." Thomas shined his flashlight into the gap. Stone steps led down, disappearing into black. A basement or cellar, hidden behind the library wall. Not marked on any map, not visible from anywhere obvious. Secret. "Should we go down?" Thomas wanted to say no. Every horror movie started this way, people going into dark places they shouldn't. But they were living in this house now, however temporarily. He needed to know what was down there. "Stay behind me." They descended carefully. The stone steps were narrow and steep, worn smooth by centuries of feet. The air grew colder as they went down, and Thomas's flashlight beam bounced off stone walls that pressed close. After 20 steps, they reached the bottom. The basement was small, maybe 15 by 20 feet. Stone walls, stone floor, stone ceiling. Wine racks lined one wall, mostly empty except for a few broken bottles. But in the corner, partially hidden behind the racks, Thomas saw something else. A wooden box, about 2 feet square, metal corners and a rusted latch. He crossed to it, knelt down despite his hips' protest. The wood was old but solid, preserved by the dry cool of the basement. No lock, just a latch that resisted then gave way. Inside, yellowed papers rolled and tied with string. A metal key tarnished green with age. A photograph of a woman standing by a fountain, smiling at the camera, and a letter addressed to whom it may concern. Thomas unrolled the papers. They crinkled in his hands, threatening to tear. The top sheet was a hand-drawn map of the Ashford Manor, showing all 3 floors. And marked on it, in 6 different locations, were X marks. Thomas's heart began beating faster. Lily crowded close, looking over his shoulder. "What is it?" "A treasure map." "Like in stories?" "Like in stories." Thomas opened the letter carefully. The handwriting was spidery, uncertain. "To whoever finds this, my husband believed this house held secrets worth protecting. He died before he could show me. If you're reading this, perhaps you're meant to find what he couldn't. Trust no one from the Ashford family. They only want what's hidden. Via Victoria Ashford, the woman who'd received those letters from her husband during the war. She'd hidden this box, left this map, this warning. Trust no one from the Ashford family. Richard Ashford had known. That's why he'd been so eager to buy the property, why he'd offered $50,000 on the spot. Not for historical preservation. For whatever was hidden in this house. Thomas looked at the map, at the 6 X marks scattered across the 3 floors. His hands were shaking. Lily noticed. "Grandpa, are you okay?" "Yeah, sweetheart, I'm okay." He met her eyes. "How do you feel about a treasure hunt?" Lily's face lit up for the first time since they'd arrived. "Really? Really, according to this map, there are 6 hidden things in this house. 6 secrets, and we're going to find them." For the first time, Thomas felt something other than despair. Purpose. Direction. This house wasn't just a shelter anymore. It was a mystery, and solving it might be the key to everything. They climbed back up from the basement with the map and Victoria's letter. In the library's dusty light, Thomas studied the map more carefully. The X marks were labeled with small numbers, 1 through 6. The first X was in the master bedroom on the 2nd floor. "We start there tomorrow. Tonight we need supplies, food, warmer clothes, tools, which means a trip to town." "Is there a town?" "GPS says there's something called Riverside about 5 miles from here. Let's see if they have a hardware store." They locked up the library. Thomas felt oddly protective of those letters in the map and returned to the kitchen to gather what little they had. The fire had died again. They'd need more wood, better fuel. The list of needs kept growing. The drive to Riverside took 20 minutes on roads barely plowed. The town appeared gradually, a cluster of buildings huddled together against the February cold. Main Street was maybe half a mile long, lined with shops that looked like they'd been there since the 1950s. A diner, a post office, a grocery store, and Thomas felt a surge of relief, a hardware store. Sullivan's Hardware was narrow and crowded, shelves stacked to the ceiling with tools and supplies. A bell jangled when they entered, bringing a wave of warm air and the smell of machine oil. Behind the counter, a woman looked up from paperwork. 70 if she was a day, with steel gray hair pulled back and sharp eyes that took in everything about Thomas and Lily in one glance. "Help you?" Thomas approached the counter. "I need cleaning supplies, heaters if you have them, work gloves, basic tools." The woman set down her pen. "You're the fool living at the Ashford Manor." News traveled fast. "Thomas Brennan. And yes, I guess I am." "Dorothy Sullivan." She didn't offer her hand. Her gaze moved to Lily, who was trying to make herself small. "And you brought a child into that death trap." "That's my granddaughter. We're managing." "Managing?" Yeah. Dorothy made it sound like the most ridiculous thing she'd ever heard. "That place has been empty for 20 years. The roof's half gone, no heat, no power. You planning to freeze to death or just wait for it to collapse on you?" "I'm planning to fix it," Dorothy laughed, sharp and humorless. "You and what, Army? You got money for contractors, materials, permits?" "I have $160. The laughter stopped. Dorothy looked at him differently now, calculating. She looked at Lily again, seeing the worn coat, the fear. Understanding settled over her face. "You got nowhere else to go." "No, ma'am." Dorothy was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood, grabbed a cart, and started moving through the store with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing this for 50 years. She pulled items from shelves: industrial cleaner, mops, buckets, work gloves, a space heater, extension cord, tarps, duct tape. The pile grew until the cart overflowed. "This is way more than $160 worth." "I know. You'll pay me back when you can. Call it a tab." "I can't accept." "You can and you will." Dorothy fixed him with a stare that allowed no argument. "I'm not letting a man and his granddaughter freeze because you're too proud to accept help." Thomas felt something crack in his chest. Kindness when you expected hardness could break you faster than cruelty. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You haven't tasted my soup." They loaded everything into the Buick while snow started falling again. Dorothy wrote out a receipt, added it to a file with Thomas's name on it, and handed him a business card. "That's my cell. You need anything, you call. I make soup on Thursdays. Always make too much. You're welcome to stop by." Driving back to the manor, Thomas glanced in the rearview mirror. Lily was watching the snow fall, a small smile on her face. "What are you thinking about?" "That lady was nice." "She was. Do you think we'll find treasure?" "I don't know, sweetheart, but we're going to try." That night, they set up the space heater in the kitchen, and it made an actual difference. The temperature rose from unbearable to merely uncomfortable. They ate canned soup heated over the rebuilt fire, and Thomas showed Lily the map again, explaining what they'd look for tomorrow. The master bedroom was on the second floor, accessible by the damaged staircase they'd seen. They'd have to be careful. One wrong step could mean a fall, and at 81, falls meant broken bones, hospitals, losing Lily to the system. But in the morning, they'd climb those stairs. They'd find the first X. They'd begin uncovering whatever secrets William Ashford had hidden and Victoria Ashford had mapped. Thomas lay in his sleeping bag that night, listening to Lily's breathing even out into sleep. And he thought about the letters he'd read, about loss and grief and families torn apart, about houses that held history in their bones. Tomorrow they'd start writing a new chapter. Not about loss, about discovery, about two people with nowhere else to go finding something worth staying for. The mansion settled around them with its familiar groans and creaks. Somewhere above, that same heavy footstep he'd heard last night. Tomorrow he'd worry about that too. But tonight, in a kitchen that was almost warm, with a granddaughter who'd smiled for the first time in days, Thomas Brennan slept and dreamed of treasure. Dawn broke over the Ashford Manor with light that made the damage worse, not better. Every broken window became a wound, every collapsed section a visible failure. Thomas stood in the kitchen doorway, drinking instant coffee made with tap water heated over the fire, watching Lily sleep. She'd kicked off most of her blankets during the night, sprawled across the makeshift bed with Mr. Patches clutched in one hand. 10 years old and already learning that safety was temporary, that the adults in her life couldn't be counted on. He wouldn't add himself to that list of failures. The space heater Dorothy had given them hummed in the corner, doing its best against impossible odds. Thomas had run the extension cord to an outlet in the main hall. Surprisingly, some circuits still had power, probably from lines the utility company hadn't bothered disconnecting. Small mercies. Lily stirred, opened her eyes, and for a moment looked confused about where she was. Then memory settled in, and her face closed down. That careful blankness she wore like armor. "Morning, we've got instant oatmeal if you're hungry." She sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Can we look for the first X today?" "That's the plan, but we need to be smart about it. That staircase to the second floor is damaged. We'll test every step before putting weight on it." They ate breakfast quickly, oatmeal mixed with water that tasted vaguely of rust, but it was hot and filling. Thomas laid out the map on the kitchen counter, studying the route to the master bedroom. Second floor, east wing. The map showed it as a large room at the end of a hallway. The X was marked in what looked like a closet. "We go slow. We're careful. And if anything seems unsafe, we come back down." "Understood?" Lily nodded, already pulling on her coat. The temperature had dropped overnight, probably 15 degrees outside, not much warmer inside. Their breath misted as they crossed through the entrance hall to the damaged staircase. In daylight, the stairs looked worse than Thomas remembered. The banister hung at an angle, several balusters missing entirely. 3 steps near the bottom had cracked down the middle, and near the top, a section of railing had collapsed completely. But the stone structure underneath seemed solid. Stone didn't rot like wood. Thomas tested the first step with his weight. It held. He climbed carefully, keeping to the edges where support would be strongest, one hand on what remained of the banister. Behind him, Lily followed his exact path, her steps light and cautious. They reached the second floor landing without incident. A long hallway stretched before them, doors on either side standing open or hanging crooked on broken hinges. Water damage had stained the walls in abstract patterns. The carpet runner down the center had rotted through in places, exposing floorboards beneath. Thomas checked the map again. Master bedroom, end of the hall, right side. They moved forward, testing floorboards before committing weight. Most were solid, but twice Thomas felt boards flex and shift, warning of weakness. They detoured around those spots. The master bedroom door stood ajar. Thomas pushed it open slowly, half expecting resistance, but it swung easily on hinges that still worked. The room beyond was massive, easily 30 by 40 feet, with a 4-poster bed frame still standing despite its rotted mattress. Windows on 2 walls let in gray light. A fireplace dominated one end, its mantel carved with intricate designs. And on the far wall, a door that probably led to the closet. Lily started toward it, but Thomas caught her shoulder. "Wait, let me check the floor first." He walked the perimeter, testing as he went. The boards near the windows were soft, probably water damage from rain coming through broken glass. But the center of the room seemed stable. The closet door had swollen in its frame and required serious force to open. When it finally gave way, Thomas stumbled back, catching himself. The closet was walk-in, larger than most modern bedrooms. Shelves lined the walls, empty except for dust and mouse droppings. A few wire hangers still hung on a rod. But there at the back wall, Thomas saw it. A panel that didn't quite match the others, slightly darker, slightly offset. He approached it carefully, running his fingers along the edges. No obvious latch or handle. He pressed against it. Nothing. Pushed harder, and felt the panel give slightly, then spring back. Some kind of release mechanism. But where? Lily squeezed past him, studying the panel with a child's lower perspective. "There's a gap at the bottom, see? Like something's supposed to go there." Thomas knelt down and saw she was right. A small rectangular gap in the baseboard, barely visible. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the key they'd found in the basement box. It was too large for any normal lock, too ornate, but it might fit this gap. He slid the key into the opening. It went in smoothly, caught on something inside. Thomas twisted, felt resistance, then a click. The panel popped open an inch. Behind it was a small alcove, maybe 3 feet deep. Inside, stacked on a narrow shelf, leather-bound journals, their covers embossed with dates. 1942, 1943, 1944, 1945. Thomas lifted them out carefully, the leather cracking slightly under his fingers. 5 journals in total, and beneath them, wrapped in cloth, a small wooden box, the kind that might hold jewelry. Lily bounced on her toes. "What's in the box? Open it." Thomas unwrapped the cloth. The box was plain pine, no decoration, with a simple latch. Inside, a stack of documents, yellowed with age but preserved by the dry alcove. The top document was typed on official letterhead. Thomas had to hold it close to read the faded ink. Office of Strategic Services. He skimmed the contents. It's about German prisoners of war. Says they were housed in work camps throughout Maine during World War II. Some at this property. Why would that be hidden? I don't know. Thomas set the documents aside and opened the first journal. The handwriting inside was neat, controlled. A man used to writing official reports. William Ashford, according to the name on the inside cover. The entries began in January 1942. January 15th. Victoria is beside herself with worry now that both boys have enlisted. Thomas left for basic training yesterday. Robert ships out next month. I assured her they would be fine, but how can I know? How can any of us know what this war will bring? Thomas flipped through Guayzas, reading entries about rationing, about bond drives, about Victoria volunteering with the Red Cross. Then an entry from September 43 caught his eye. September 20th. The first group of German POWs arrived today to help with the lumber operation. Most are young, barely older than Thomas. One, a man named Johann Schmidt, speaks excellent English. He was an engineer in Munich before the war. We talked for hours about architecture, about design. Strange to find kinship with an enemy. More entries followed about Johann Schmidt. Conversations about building techniques, about the pre-war world, about books they'd both read. A friendship forming across enemy lines, carefully documented in William's precise handwriting. Then entries from late 1940 and the tone shifted completely. November 3rd. The telegram came today. Thomas killed in Belgium. Victoria has not stopped, crying. I don't know how to comfort her. I don't know how to breathe. Our beautiful boy, gone. Thomas felt his throat tighten. He remembered his own Catherine's death, that same sense of the world breaking apart. November 30th, Johann is being transferred back to a permanent facility in Pennsylvania. He came to say goodbye. He told me something in confidence, something that could change everything if it's true. He has documentation, plans, something valuable he needs hidden. He trusts me because we are friends, and friendship transcends war. I will help him. The entries after that were cryptic, references to Johann's gift and the project and preparations for after. The final entries in the journal from early 1945 mentioned construction work in the conservatory, secret excavations, something about foundations and hidden rooms. The last entry, dated March 1945, Johann's gift is secured. Only Victoria knows the location. I've drawn a map as insurance, but I pray I never need it. If something happens to me, if the wrong people come looking, the map will guide those who should find it. The Ashford family must never know. Their greed would destroy everything Johann tried to protect. Thomas closed the journal and looked at Lily. Her eyes were wide. What was the gift? Something valuable enough to hide. Something William didn't want his own family to know about. Like treasure? Maybe, or maybe information. Documents. Something from the war. Thomas examined the map more carefully now. The second X was marked in the conservatory, specifically in the foundation. According to William's journal, that's where they'd done construction work, where they'd hidden something in. We need to get into the conservatory. They gathered the journals in the wooden box, carried them back downstairs to the kitchen, where they could study everything in better light. Thomas spread out the documents from the box. Most were in German, beyond his ability to read, but there were drawings, architectural plans, engineering specifications, and one document in English. A certificate of deposit for U.S. bearer bonds, dated 19 Orm, face value $50,000. Thomas's hand started shaking. Bearer bonds from 1904, if they were still valid, could be worth 10 times their face value or more, possibly much more. $500,000, maybe more. Grandpa, you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. But his mind was racing. This was why Richard Ashford wanted the property, not for history. Oh no, for whatever William and Johann had hidden here, 50,000 in bearer bonds was just the beginning. There were 5 more X marks on the map, 5 more hiding places. A loud bang from the front of the house made them both jump. Footsteps in the entrance hall, heavy and deliberate. Thomas grabbed Lily and pulled her behind him, looking for anything that could serve as a weapon. His hand closed on a rusty poker from the fireplace tools. "Who's there?" The footsteps stopped. Then a voice, male and unfamiliar. "Mr. Brennan, it's Jack Morrison. Dorothy Sullivan sent me." Thomas relaxed slightly but kept the poker. "Come to the kitchen, slowly." A man appeared in the doorway, hands raised to show he meant no threat. Early 60s, wearing work clothes and in heavy boots, with a weathered face that spoke of years working outdoors. He took in the makeshift camp they'd set up, the sleeping bags, the space heater, and something in his expression softened. "Dorothy called me last night. Said you were living here with your granddaughter. Said you might need help with the repairs." "I can't afford to pay you." "I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for something to do." Jack lowered his hands. "I worked on this property back in 1995. Did some repairs for Victoria Ashford before she died. Been doing odd jobs since then, but nothing that matters. Dorothy thought maybe we could help each other." Thomas studied the man. There was sadness in his eyes, something familiar, the look of someone who'd lost something important and hadn't figured out how to live without it. "Why would you work for free?" "Because I need a reason to get up in the morning, because my daughter hasn't called in 2 years, because fixing something broken might help me figure out how to fix my own shit." Jack's voice was matter-of-fact, no self-pity. "You got a broken house. I got time and skills. Seems like a fair trade." Lily tugged on Thomas's sleeve. "He seems nice." "Nice people can still be dangerous." "But Dorothy sent him. She was nice." Thomas sighed. The truth was, he needed help. The manor was too big, too damaged for one 81-year-old man to restore, and Jack Morrison looked solid, reliable. Someone who kept his word. "All right, but we start small. Help me get into the conservatory. If that goes well, we'll talk about more." Jack nodded, already scanning the kitchen, making mental calculations. "You got heat in here, water, electricity to run that heater. That's better than I expected. The conservatory, though, that's bad. Most of the glass is gone, frames rusted through. What's in there that you need?" Thomas hesitated. Trust was earned, not given. But the map had led them this far, and William's journal said Johann's gift was in the conservatory foundation. They couldn't excavate that alone. There's something buried in the foundation, something important. Buried by who? The previous owner, during the war. Jack's eyebrows rose. "German POWs worked this property in the 40s. I heard stories when I was doing repairs for Victoria. She was dying of cancer, talked a lot about the past. Mentioned her husband had done something during the war, something secret. Never said what." "You knew Victoria?" "A little. She was sad all the time. Haunted. Talked about her husband William like he'd just died, even though it had been 30 years. Talked about her son Thomas, who died in Belgium." Jack paused. "She said something once that stuck with me. She said, 'William left me a gift I've never found. The house keeps its secrets.' I thought she was confused from the pain medication. But maybe not." Thomas made a decision. He pulled out the map and laid it on the counter. "William left this. 6 locations, 6 things hidden. We found the first one, documents and bearer bonds. The second is in the conservatory." Jack leaned over the map, studying it carefully. When he looked up, there was respect in his eyes. "This is legitimate, not just treasure hunter fantasy?" "The documents we found were real, official, from the Office of Strategic Services." "Then we need to do this right. The conservatory floor is concrete, but it's cracked and broken. If something's buried in the foundation, we'll need tools. Jackhammer, probably. Shovels for sure. He pulled out his phone. I've got equipment in my truck, and I know a guy who owes me a favor, has a small excavator. I told you I can't pay, and I told you I'm not asking for money. But if we find something valuable, something that could be sold, I'd ask you to remember who helped you dig it up. Fair? It was more than fair. It was generous. Thomas extended his hand. Deal. They shook, and Thomas felt something shift. He wasn't alone anymore. Lily wasn't alone. They had an ally. Jack left to get his equipment and returned within an hour with a truck bed full of tools. Together, they approached the conservatory through the back of the house. In daylight, the structure was even more devastated than Thomas had realized. The metal framework was mostly intact, but 90% of the glass panels were gone. Snow had drifted inside, covering what remained of dead plants and broken pots. The floor was cracked concrete, heaved and buckled from freeze-thaw cycles. According to the map, the X was in the northwest corner, near where the conservatory attached to the main house. Jack used a shovel to clear snow and debris, revealing concrete that had a different color in one section, darker as if it had been poured separately or at a different time. This patch is newer, well, newer relative to the rest, probably 1940s based on the composition. Someone poured concrete here after the main floor was done. That's where we dig. Jack retrieved a sledgehammer and safety glasses from his truck. You and Lily should stand back. This is going to be loud and messy. They retreated to the conservatory doorway while Jack went to work. The sledgehammer rang against concrete with sharp, violent cracks. Lily covered her ears. Thomas watched as Jack systematically broke through the patch, working from the edges inward. After 20 minutes of hard labor, Jack stopped, breathing hard, and knelt down. Got something. Metal. Thomas moved closer. Through the broken concrete, he could see the edge of something, dull metal shaped like a trunk or chest. Jack used a pry bar to widen the hole, then reached down and felt around the edges. It's a German military trunk, World War II era, from the markings, sealed tight, which is why it survived. Together, Thomas and Jack worked to free the trunk from its concrete prison. It was heavy, required both men straining to lift it, Jack doing most of the work while Thomas helped guide. They set it down on a clear patch of conservatory floor, and Thomas knelt beside it. The padlock had rusted through, barely holding. One hit with the sledgehammer and it fell apart. Thomas opened the trunk slowly, the hinges screaming in protest. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth and canvas, papers, lots of papers, engineering blueprints with German text, technical drawings, and beneath those, something that made Thomas's breath catch. A stack of documents held together with a crumbling rubber band. He pulled them out carefully. U.S. bearer bonds, 20 of them. Face value, $50,000 total. The documents from the hidden closet had mentioned bonds, but Thomas had thought that was the treasure. This was more, much more. If each bond from 1944 was worth 10 times face value now, they were looking at $500,000. Jack whistled low. That's real? If the bonds are still valid, yes. Beneath the bonds was a small wooden box, and inside that, an iron cross medal, German military, and a photograph of a young man in Wehrmacht uniform. He was smiling, relaxed, the way people smile when they think they have a future. On the back of the photo, written in English, Johann Schmidt, 1943, and at the very bottom of the trunk, a letter. The paper was thick, expensive, preserved by the oilcloth. Thomas unfolded it carefully. My friend William, I trust you with this. These bonds are my life savings, meant for a new life in America after the war. If I do not survive, they are yours. Use them well. The blueprints are insurance, proof of what I can do, what I can build. If the authorities ask questions, tell them I was a laborer, nothing more. The truth would endanger us both. Your friend always, Johann Schmidt. Thomas sat back on his heels, mind racing. Johann had given William his entire savings, had trusted an American to protect not just his money, but his identity. The blueprints suggested Johann was more than a simple prisoner. He was skilled, educated, an engineer, just like William's journal had said. What do we do with this? Lily's voice was small, uncertain. First, we verify the bonds are valid. Second, we secure them somewhere safer than a trunk in an open conservatory. Third, Thomas looked at Jack. We don't tell anyone, not yet, not until we know what we're dealing with. Jack nodded. Agreed, but Mr. Brennan, you should know, if those bonds are real, if they're worth what you think they're worth, people will come looking. Richard Ashford's been trying to get this property for years. If he gets wind of this, he already knows something's here. That's why he showed up yesterday with a cash offer. Then he's going to be a problem. Thomas carefully repacked the trunk, sealed it as best he could. They carried it between them back to the kitchen, the safest place in the house. Thomas hid it in the servants' room closet, under their sleeping bags. Not perfect, but better than leaving it exposed. That afternoon, Jack worked on making the kitchen genuinely habitable. He brought in a generator from his truck, got proper lighting set up, cleaned the cast iron stove, checked the gas lines, determined they were safe enough to use. Within a few hours, they had real heat, real light, a functioning cooking surface. The kitchen transformed from survival shelter to actual living space. Lily helped where she could, carrying tools, holding flashlights, asking endless questions. Jack answered each one with patience, explaining what he was doing and why. Thomas watched them work together and felt a strange gratitude. This man, a stranger 24 hours ago, was giving them more than repair work. He was giving them hope. That evening, they ate a real meal, soup heated on the stove, bread Jack had brought from town. Lily fell asleep early, exhausted from the day's excitement and work. Thomas and Jack sat in the kitchen while the generator hummed in the background. Tell me about your daughter. Jack was quiet for a long moment. Rachel, she's 24. Got married young to a guy I didn't trust. Tried to tell her that, which was a mistake. She stopped calling. The marriage fell apart 2 years ago, and instead of coming home, she just disappeared into her life in Denver. I call once a week. She never answers. I send letters. They go unanswered. I know that silence. Dorothy told me about your kids, that they stopped calling too. Not exactly. My phone broke. I got a new one. Set it up wrong. They were calling dead numbers. I thought they'd forgotten me. They thought I'd disappeared. Thomas pulled out his cell phone, looked at it like a foreign object. All this time, I blamed them. Turned out to be my fault. You going to fix it? I tried. Called them yesterday. No answer. Maybe they're still mad. Maybe they moved on. Jack leaned back, studying Thomas. Or maybe they're as scared as you are. Scared of rejection, scared of being hurt again. Fear makes people do stupid things, like stop trying. The words hit harder than Thomas expected. He thought about the last time he'd really tried with Rebecca, Michael, Emma, years ago, before Catherine died. After her death, he'd withdrawn into grief, and when he'd finally surfaced, the distance had become permanent, or so he'd believed. Too late to change it now. Bullshit. Jack's voice was flat, certain. It's too late when you're dead. Until then, you keep trying. They sat in silence while the generator thrummed and Lily slept, and somewhere in the house above them, something settled with a groan of old timber. Thomas thought about the bearer bonds, about the 4 remaining X marks on the map, about Richard Ashford and his expensive car and his threats. We need to move fast, find the other locations before Richard figures out what we're doing. Agreed, but we also need to make this place genuinely safe. If Child Protective Services shows up and sees the conditions, they'll take Lily. Yeah, so we work on 2 tracks. Hunt for whatever's hidden, but also do enough repair work to pass inspection if it comes to that. It was a good plan, practical. Thomas nodded. How long will that take? The basics? 2 weeks if I work full-time and we get lucky, but we'll need materials. The generator helps, but you need real power. Heat throughout the house, working plumbing. That's expensive. Thomas thought about the bearer bonds. If they could cash even one, they'd have enough money for materials and more. But bearer bonds from World War II weren't something you could just deposit at a bank. They'd need authentication, verification, probably lawyers. One problem at a time. Tomorrow we look for the 3rd X. After that, we figure out money. They worked out a schedule, mornings for treasure hunting, afternoons for repairs. Jack would bring more equipment, start on critical fixes. Thomas and Lily would explore the house systematically, following the map. That night, lying in his sleeping bag with Lily's quiet breathing beside him, Thomas pulled out the photograph of Johann Schmidt. The young man smiled out at him across 80 years, frozen in a moment before everything fell apart. Johann had survived the war, had hidden his savings with William Ashford, had trusted an enemy turned friend to protect what mattered. What had happened to him after? Had he returned to Germany, stayed in America, built that new life he dreamed of? The questions followed Thomas into uneasy sleep, where he dreamed of men in uniform, of concrete being poured over secrets, of houses that held their truths in foundations and walls, waiting for someone brave or desperate enough to dig them up. Morning came with Jack already at work. Thomas woke to the sound of hammering from somewhere in the house. He found Jack in the entrance hall, reinforcing the staircase banister with fresh lumber. Started early. Wanted to make sure that staircase is safe before we go up again. By the time Lily woke and they'd eaten breakfast, Jack had secured the banister and replaced the cracked steps with plywood reinforcements. The staircase was still ugly, but it was functional and safe. According to the map, the third X was in the attic. Thomas hadn't been up there yet. The access was through a pull-down ladder in the second-floor hallway, and he'd been avoiding it. Attics in abandoned houses were never good news. Jack went first, testing the ladder before allowing Thomas and Lily to follow. The attic was massive, running the full length of the house. The peaked roof soared overhead, mostly intact here. Weak February light filtered through small dormers. The space was filled with trunks, boxes, furniture covered in sheets. Generations of accumulated belongings left to rot. The map showed the X near the center of the attic, in the area directly above the main hall. They picked their way through debris, Jack clearing a path. Boxes had disintegrated, spilling their contents. Old clothes, books, papers. One trunk held Christmas decorations from the 1950s. Another contained what looked like military uniforms. Then Lily called out, "There's a trunk here with a name on it. Says Thomas Ashford." They converged on the trunk. It was military issue, like the one they'd found in the conservatory, but this one had been stored properly. The name was stenciled on top, PVT Thomas Ashford. Inside, a uniform, folded and preserved. Letters tied with ribbon, photographs, and a diary, leather-bound. The pages filled with handwriting that started confident and grew shakier as it progressed. Thomas opened the diary to the first page. The entry was dated June 1944, written somewhere in France before the invasion. A soldier's account of fear and boredom, of waiting for something terrible to happen. Thomas flipped through pages, reading snippets. Then an entry from November 1944. November 15th, I was hit, don't remember much. They say I was unconscious for 3 days. When I woke up, I didn't know my name, didn't know where I was. The doctors say it might come back. It hasn't. They're sending me home, but home to where? I don't know who I am. Thomas kept reading, his heart beating faster. More entries, each one showing a young man lost in his own mind. Dates from 1945, 1946. Descriptions of wandering, of trying to find something familiar, of standing outside a big stone house in Maine and feeling like it meant something, but not knowing what. The final entry, dated March 1949. Mother found me today. She said my name is Thomas Ashford and I died in Belgium. But I'm here, alive, and she's crying like I'm a ghost. She brought me inside. I don't remember this place, but she says it's home. Maybe that's enough. The diary ended there. Thomas flipped through the remaining pages, all blank. He looked at Jack and Lily, throat tight. Thomas Ashford didn't die in Belgium. He came home with amnesia. His mother hid him here. Jesus, Jack sat back. That's why Victoria was so sad. Her son came back, but he didn't know her, didn't know himself. Thomas dug deeper into the trunk. Beneath the diary were medical records, discharge papers from a military hospital in Philadelphia, diagnosis of severe head trauma and memory loss, prognosis uncertain. And beneath those, more letters. These were from Victoria to someone named Christopher Ashford. He opened one dated 1950. Dear Christopher, I know you don't understand why I won't let you visit. The truth is too painful to explain. Thomas is alive but lost. He looks at me like a stranger. I'm caring for him, but he's not the son you remember. Please respect my privacy. Your loving mother, Victoria. Dozens of letters, all with the same theme. Victoria pleading for space, for understanding, never explaining that Thomas had returned. Christopher Ashford, the other son, the one who'd survived the war intact, never knew his brother had come home. She kept this secret for years. Lily's voice was hushed. Because sometimes the truth is harder than silence. Because she got her son back, but he was already gone. Thomas carefully replaced everything in the trunk. This isn't the treasure, this is just tragedy. But at the bottom of the trunk, wrapped in oilcloth, was another wooden box, smaller than the others. Inside, a key identical to the one they'd used in the master bedroom, and a note in Victoria's handwriting. The heart of the house beats in the center. Find the heat, find the truth. V.A. Jack read over Thomas's shoulder. The heart of the house, the main fireplace maybe, it's the only chimney that connects all 3 floors. They left the attic carefully, descended to the main hall. The fireplace there was massive, 10 feet wide, stone surround carved with intricate designs. Thomas examined it while Jack held the flashlight. The carvings weren't random. They formed patterns, symbols, and near the base, barely visible, one stone was a slightly different color. Thomas pressed it. Nothing. Pushed harder. The stone shifted inward with a click, and suddenly a section of the fireplace surround swung open, revealing a gap behind the stonework. Inside was darkness. Thomas aimed the flashlight and saw stone steps leading down, narrow and steep. Another hidden passage. Jack tested the first step cautiously. It's solid, built into the foundation. They descended, Lily between them for safety. The stairs went down 20 feet, ending in a wine cellar Thomas had read about in property records but never found. The cellar was small, maybe 15 by 20 feet, wine racks still mounted on the walls, empty except for broken bottles and dust. But Jack was studying in the back wall. This isn't right. The foundation should extend another 10 feet. This wall is interior. He ran his hands along the stones, pressing, testing. Near the floor he found a gap, and when Thomas brought the second key, it slid into an opening they hadn't noticed. The same mechanism as before. A click, and the wall pivoted on hidden hinges. Behind it was a room, small, maybe 20 by 30 feet, but perfectly preserved. The air that rushed out was stale but dry. Inside, Victorian furniture, undisturbed. Paintings on the walls. A bookshelf with first editions. A jewelry box on a small table. And in the corner, a safe. Thomas stepped inside, barely breathing. This was Johann Schmidt's gift, the thing William had died protecting. A hidden treasure room built by a German POW engineer, filled with things meant to be preserved for people who would never see them. Jack let out a low whistle. This is worth a fortune. Those paintings alone. But Thomas was focused on the letter lying on the table. He picked it up, unfolded it carefully. Johann Schmidt's handwriting, stronger now, written in English. Dear William, thank you for hiding me when the authorities came. This room is my gift to your family, a place to hide your treasures from the world. The safe contains more bonds, enough to secure your children's future. The combination is Victoria's birthday. May your family prosper, and remember that even enemies can become brothers. Your friend always, Johann. Victoria's birthday. Thomas looked at Jack. Do you know it? Victoria died in 1967. I found her death certificate when I was researching the property. Born April 12, 1902. Thomas approached the safe. It was old-fashioned, with a dial combination. He tried 04-12-02. Nothing. Tried variations. Finally 4-12-1902, and he felt the tumbler's catch. The safe door swung open. Inside were more bearer bonds, many more. Thomas counted them with shaking hands. 50 bonds, face value $50,000 total. If they were worth 10 times face value, they were looking at $500,000. Add the bonds from the conservatory and the total was close to $1 million. But there was something else in the safe, a wooden case, flat and rectangular. Thomas opened it and found technical drawings, blueprints for something called Project Paperclip. Official U.S. government documents classified. What is this? Jack leaned over, read the headers, and his face went pale. Project Paperclip was the program that brought Nazi scientists to America after the war. These are recruitment documents, lists of names, credentials, locations. He looked at Thomas. This is historical dynamite. If these are authentic, a crash from upstairs cut him off. Heavy, deliberate. The sound of someone moving through the house without caring about stealth. Thomas's blood went cold. He grabbed Lily and pulled her behind him. Who's up there? Jack was already moving toward the hidden door. Stay here, I'll check. Like hell. Thomas pushed Lily into the corner. Stay in this room. Don't come out unless we call for you. Grandpa, stay. Thomas and Jack climbed back up the stone steps, emerged through the false fireplace into the main hall. The front door stood wide open, snow blowing in. And standing in the entrance was Richard Ashford, flanked by two men Thomas didn't recognize. They wore suits under their coats, sunglasses despite the overcast sky. Professional muscle. Richard's smile was cold, triumphant. Mr. Brennan, I did warn you. 1 week to accept my offer. That week is up. Thomas stepped forward, positioning himself between Richard and the hidden passage. Behind him, through the false fireplace opening, he could hear Lily's terrified breathing. Jack moved to his right, creating a barrier with their bodies. This is private property. You're trespassing. Richard's smile never wavered. Actually, I'm preventing a crime. You've been excavating this property without permits, disturbing what may be historical artifacts. I've already contacted the Maine Historical Preservation Office. They're very interested in what you might have found. One of the men flanking Richard pulled out a phone, started taking photos of the room. Thomas saw him focus on the open fireplace, the revealed passage. No way to hide it now. There's nothing here that belongs to you. Oh, I disagree. This property has always been Ashford property. Your grandfather's claim was built on fraudulent documents. I have lawyers prepared to prove it. Richard took a step closer, his expensive shoes crunching on debris. But we don't need to make this ugly. Tell me what you found, and we can negotiate a finder's fee. 10% of whatever's recovered. That's more than generous. Jack's voice came out hard. Get out. Richard's attention shifted to Jack, recognition flickering across his face. Jack Morrison, I remember you. You did work here back in the 90s for my Aunt Victoria. Tell me, did she ever mention where William hid his treasures? Victoria was dying and confused. She didn't mention anything. Liar. The word came out flat, certain. She told you something. Why else would you be here now, helping this squatter? Richard gestured to his companions. Search the house. Start with the obvious hiding places. The two men moved forward. Thomas raised his hand. You set 1 foot past this hall. I call the police. Go ahead, call them. I'm sure they'll be very interested in what you've been doing here. Breaking and entering, possibly theft of historical artifacts, endangering a minor. The mention of Lily made Thomas's chest tighten with rage and fear. I own this property legally. For now, but my lawyers are already filing motions. Give it a week, maybe 2, and a judge will rule in my favor. Then everything you've found, everything you've hidden becomes mine. Richard's smile widened. I've waited my entire life for this. My Uncle William promised my father there was a fortune hidden here. The family searched for decades. And now you, some nobody with a questionable deed, think you can waltz in and claim what's rightfully ours? Thomas felt the weight of the situation crushing down. Richard had resources, lawyers, connections. Thomas had an 81-year-old body, a frightened granddaughter, and a friend who'd known him 3 days. The math didn't work in their favor. But something in Richard's desperation gave Thomas leverage. The man had been searching his entire life, which meant he didn't actually know what was hidden here. He was guessing, hoping, driven by family stories and obsession. If there was a fortune here, don't you think someone would have found it by now? This house has been abandoned for 20 years. Because no one knew where to look, but you found something. I can see it in your eyes. You found William's map, didn't you? Or his journals. Something that showed you where to dig. Thomas kept his expression neutral. I found letters, old correspondence, nothing valuable. Then you won't mind if we search. I mind very much, and unless you have a warrant, you're leaving. Now. Richard's jaw tightened. The pleasant mask slipped, revealing something uglier beneath. You're making a mistake. I offered you a way out. $50,000, then $100,000. I was trying to be generous. But you're forcing my hand. What hand? You have no legal claim here. I have lawyers who will tie you up in court for years. I have connections with every city official and judge in this county. I have resources you can't imagine. Richard's voice dropped lower, more threatening. And I have friends who can make problems disappear. Old men have accidents. Children get placed in foster care when their guardians prove unfit. Houses burn down. The threat was explicit now, no longer veiled. Thomas felt Jack tense beside him. Through the fireplace opening, he heard Lily whimper. Are you threatening my granddaughter? I'm stating facts. This is a dangerous structure. Anything could happen. Richard gestured to his companions. We're leaving, but we'll be back with legal authority. And when we are, everything you found becomes evidence in a court case you can't win. Think about that, Mr. Brennan. Think about what matters more, your pride or that little girl's safety. They left, the two men following Richard out into the snow. The front door remained open, cold air pouring in. Thomas stood frozen until he heard their car doors slam, engine start, tires crunching away down the driveway. Then he moved. Then he ran to the fireplace passage. Lily, it's okay. You can come out. She emerged from the hidden room, face pale, eyes huge with fear. Are they going to take me away? Thomas pulled her against him, held her tight. Over her head, he met Jack's gaze. The older man's face was grim. He means it. Richard doesn't make empty threats. If he says he'll use the courts, he will. If he says he'll have this place condemned, he will. Then what do we do? Jack walked to the front door, closed it, leaned against it. We need to verify those bonds immediately. Get them authenticated and liquidated. With money, you can hire real lawyers, fight him properly. How long does authentication take? For World War II bearer bonds? Could be weeks, maybe months if there are complications. Thomas's mind raced. Weeks they didn't have. Richard would file his motions, get the property tied up in legal proceedings, possibly get Lily removed to foster care within days. They needed leverage faster than that. The project paperclip documents. Those are historical records. If we turn them over to the government, to a museum, they'll take them as evidence and you'll never see a penny. Jack pushed off from the door. But they might give you credibility. Proof you're trying to preserve history, not loot it. Lily pulled away from Thomas, wiping her eyes. Can't we just sell one painting? There were lots in that room. One wouldn't matter. Out of the mouths of children came wisdom. Thomas looked at Jack. She's right. The bonds take time to verify, but art can be appraised and sold quickly. One painting, enough to fund legal defense and make this place safe for Lily. Art theft is serious. If Richard claims those paintings belong to the estate, they don't belong to the estate. They belong to Johann Schmidt, who gave them to William Ashford, who left everything to my grandfather. Chain of custody is clear. Thomas moved toward the hidden room. We photograph everything, document it all, then take one piece to be appraised, legitimate, above board. They spent the next hour photographing the treasure room from every angle. Jack used his phone, taking hundreds of images. The furniture, the paintings, the jewelry box, the safe, the project paperclip documents. Evidence of discovery, time-stamped and georeferenced. Thomas selected the smallest painting in a landscape maybe 2 feet by 3 feet, showing mountains and a river valley. The signature in the corner was illegible, but the style looked European, pre-war. He wrapped it carefully in blankets from their sleeping bags. There's an art dealer in Portland, Jack offered. Guy named Marcus Webb. He's legitimate, deals with estate sales and auctions. If anyone can appraise this quickly and discreetly, it's him. They locked the hidden room, closed the false fireplace wall, and Thomas felt like he was abandoning something precious. But Lily needed safety more than the room needed protecting. Everything was a trade-off now. The drive to Portland took 45 minutes. Marcus Webb's gallery was tucked into a renovated warehouse in the Old Port District, all exposed brick and track lighting. Inside smelled of money and careful preservation. Webb himself was mid-50s, wearing black jeans and a cashmere sweater, with the kind of glasses that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Jack made introductions. Thomas unwrapped the painting on Webb's examination table. The dealer went very still, then pulled out a magnifying loupe and leaned close. Where did you get this? Family estate. It's been in storage for decades. Webb examined the signature, the canvas, the frame. He took photos from multiple angles, consulted a thick reference book, pulled up databases on his computer. 20 minutes passed in tense silence. Finally, Webb straightened. This is a Ferdinand Hodler, Swiss painter, died 1918. This particular piece was thought lost during World War II. It disappeared from a private collection in Vienna in 1938. He looked at Thomas with new respect and caution. Do you understand what you have here? Stolen art, looted by the Nazis. Exactly, which means it can't be sold on the open market. It belongs to the original owner's heirs, assuming any survived. Webb pulled out paperwork. There are protocols for this. The Commission for Looted Art in Europe handles restitution. They also pay finder's fees, typically 10% of appraised value. How much is it worth? Webb consulted his notes. Hodler's work has sold at auction for anywhere from $500,000 to $2 million. This piece, given its provenance and condition, I'd estimate $1.2 million. Your finder's fee would be $120,000. Thomas felt the world tilt. $120,000. Enough to hire lawyers, make the manor safe, fight Richard Ashford properly. And there were more paintings in that room, many more. How long does the process take? I can contact the commission today. They'll want to verify provenance, examine the piece, trace ownership. Could be 3 to 6 months before you see payment. 3 to 6 months. Thomas didn't have 3 weeks. He must have shown his desperation because Webb's expression softened. There is another option. I can offer you an advance against the finder's fee, $25,000 right now in exchange for representation rights. When the commission pays out, I take my cut and you get the rest. It's not uncommon in these situations. Why would you do that? Because if you have one hodler, you might have more looted art. I want to be your representative for all of it. This could be the find of the decade. Webb extended his hand. Do we have a deal? Thomas looked at Jack, who nodded slightly. They shook. Webb pulled out forms, started filling them with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Within an hour, Thomas had a cashier's check for $25,000 and a contract giving Webb representation rights for any additional recovered artwork. Driving back to Riverside, Thomas felt something like hope. $25,000 wouldn't solve everything, but it was a start. Enough to hire a local lawyer at least. Enough to buy materials for repairs. Enough to prove he wasn't helpless. We need to contact the commission ourselves, Jack suggested. Document everything in that room, establish official discovery, beat Richard to the punch. Agreed, but first we secure the space. If Richard comes back with his thugs, he will. Tonight, probably. Men like that don't wait. Jack's grip tightened on the steering wheel. I'll stay at the manor. Keep watch. You and Lily should stay in town at a motel. I'm not abandoning the house. It's not abandoning. It's being smart. Richard wants to catch you in a vulnerable position. Don't give him the satisfaction. Thomas wanted to argue, but Jack was right. The manor was indefensible, especially that night with a child to protect. Better to retreat, regroup, come back with a plan. They stopped at Dorothy's hardware store. She took one look at their faces and locked the front door, flipped the sign to closed. What happened? Thomas told her everything. The discoveries, Richard's threats, the trip to Portland. Dorothy listened without interrupting, her expression growing harder with each detail. That son of a bitch. Richard's been trying to buy up properties in Riverside for years. Wants to turn this whole area into luxury condos. The manor's the keystone. Biggest property, best location. If he gets it, he'll have enough land to push through development plans. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling a town meeting. Tonight. People need to know what he's planning. Dorothy, I don't want to drag the whole town into this. Too late. You're already in it, and we take care of our own here. She started texting with the speed of someone half her age. There's a motel on Route 1 about 10 minutes from here. Clean, cheap. I'll call ahead, tell them to expect you. That evening, Thomas and Lily checked into the Riverside Motor Lodge. 2 beds, clean sheets, heat that worked. Luxury compared to the manor's servant room. Lily immediately claimed the bed near the window, spread out her homework that Emma had packed weeks ago. She hadn't touched it since they'd arrived. You should do some schoolwork. Your mom will ask. Will she? Lily's voice was small. She hasn't called once. Thomas pulled out his phone. 2 missed calls from Emma, both from earlier today. He'd been so focused on Richard and the paintings that he'd missed them. He called back. She answered on the first ring. Dad? Oh, thank God. I've been calling for hours. Sorry. We were in Portland. Cell service was spotty. Portland? Why? Her voice carried an edge of panic. Is Lily okay? Let me talk to her. Thomas handed the phone to Lily. His granddaughter's face transformed, all the careful control vanishing. Mommy, when are you coming to get me? A pause, but you said a few weeks. Another pause, longer. I know you're busy, I know. Tears started flowing. Okay, I love you too. She handed the phone back. Thomas stepped into the bathroom for privacy. Emma, what's going on? The divorce is a nightmare. Richard's lawyers are fighting everything. My lawyer says we're looking at 6 months minimum, maybe a year. And I can't. Dad, I can't take care of Lily right now. I'm barely holding myself together. Her voice cracked. Can she stay with you? Just until things settle? 6 months. A year. Thomas looked through the bathroom door at Lily curled on the bed, crying silently into Mr. Patches. Yeah, she can stay. But Emma, I need you to do something for me. Anything. Call her every day, even if it's just 5 minutes. She needs to know you haven't forgotten her. I haven't forgotten. I know, but she doesn't. She's 10 years old and her world is falling apart. Make time. Silence on the line. Then quietly. You're right. I'm sorry. I'll call her tomorrow, every day. I promise. After they hung up, Thomas sat with Lily while she cried herself out. When she finally quieted, she looked up at him with red eyes. I'm going to live with you now? Looks like it, for a while anyway. At the scary house? We're going to make it less scary. Jack's helping, Dorothy's helping. We'll fix it up, make it a real home. What if that mean man takes it away? Thomas thought about Richard Ashford, about threats and lawyers and the weight of money against determination. Then we fight. Some things are worth fighting for. Lily absorbed this, then nodded. I can be brave if you're brave. Deal. They ordered pizza from a place Dorothy had recommended, ate while watching cartoons on the motel TV. Normal domestic, the kind of evening Thomas hadn't experienced in years. Lily fell asleep during the second show, curled around Mr. Patches. Thomas covered her with blankets and sat watching her breathe, feeling the crushing weight of responsibility. He'd promised to keep her safe, but safe meant more than just shelter and food. It meant stability, permanence, a future she could count on. And all of that hung on winning a fight against someone with more money, more connections, more power. His phone buzzed. Text from Jack. At the manor. All quiet so far. Get some rest. Another text, this one from a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Brennan, this is Marcus Webb. The commission responded faster than expected. They want to examine the painting and the site where it was recovered. Can you meet them tomorrow at 10 a.m. at my gallery? This is good news. It means they take the claim seriously. Thomas replied affirmatively to both messages, then lay back on his bed without undressing. Sleep felt impossible, but exhaustion won eventually. He dreamed of hidden rooms and old letters, of men in uniforms speaking languages he couldn't understand, of houses that held secrets in their foundations like bones. Morning came with weak sunlight through thin curtains. Lily was already awake, sitting cross-legged on her bed, watching cartoons with the volume low. Thomas showered, shaved for the first time in days, put on clean clothes. If he was meeting with a commission for looted art, he should look like someone responsible, trustworthy. They stopped at a diner for breakfast. Lily picked at pancakes while Thomas forced down coffee and eggs. His stomach was twisted with nerves. Everything hinged on this meeting. If the commission verified the painting's provenance, he'd have legitimacy, proof he was recovering history, not looting it. Marcus Webb's gallery was more crowded this morning. 2 people waited inside, a woman in her 60s with severe gray hair and expensive clothes, and a younger man carrying a camera and equipment case. Webb made introductions. Mr. Brennan, this is Dr. Helena Strauss from the Commission for Looted Art in Europe, and her assistant, David Chen. Dr. Strauss, Mr. Brennan is the property owner who recovered the hodler. Dr. Strauss's handshake was firm, her gaze assessing. Mr. Brennan, I need to see the recovery site. Provenance for looted art requires documentation of discovery location, condition, and any supporting materials. I have photographs, hundreds of them. That's a start, but I need to examine the space in person. Mr. Webb says there may be additional pieces. Thomas hesitated. Showing her the hidden room meant revealing everything. The bonds, the project paperclip documents, all of it. But she was his best chance at establishing legitimacy before Richard Ashford made his next move. There's a hidden room built during World War II by a German POW. It contains multiple paintings, documents, and other items. Everything's been preserved. Dr. Strauss's eyes lit with professional excitement. A sealed room? Untouched since the war? Yes, I can show you, but I need something in return. Her expression cooled slightly. The commission doesn't negotiate finder's fees. Those are set by established protocols. I'm not asking about fees, I'm asking for documentation. Official paperwork establishing me as the legal discoverer with rights to the property. There's a man trying to claim the estate through spurious legal challenges. I need protection. Dr. Strauss considered this. If the recovery is legitimate and documented properly, the commission can provide certification of discovery. That carries legal weight in most jurisdictions, but I can't make promises until I've examined the site. It was the best he'd get. Thomas gave her the address. They agreed to meet at the manor in 1 hour, giving Thomas time to warn Jack and secure Lily somewhere safe. He didn't want his granddaughter at the house when strangers started examining their discoveries. Dorothy agreed to watch Lily at the hardware store. Thomas drove to the manor alone, his hands tight on the steering wheel. Jack's truck was parked in the circular drive, and Jack himself appeared on the front steps as Thomas pulled up. Any trouble last night? Richard drove by around midnight, didn't stop, just slowed down, looked at the house, sent a message. Commission's coming to examine the site. Should be here within the hour. Jack nodded. I'll get the room opened up. Make sure everything's accessible. They worked together, opening the false fireplace, descending to the hidden room. In daylight from Jack's portable work lights, the space looked even more impressive. The paintings glowed on the walls. The furniture stood elegant and forgotten. The safe gaped open, its contents visible. Dr. Strauss arrived exactly on time, David Chen behind her with equipment. They descended carefully, and Thomas watched Dr. Strauss's face transform. Professional excitement giving way to something deeper. Recognition of historical significance. This is extraordinary. She moved through the room like someone in a museum, examining each piece without touching. The preservation is remarkable. The paintings alone, she stopped in front of a large canvas showing a woman reading. This is a Monet from his early period. It was stolen from a Paris apartment in 1942. She turned to Thomas. Do you understand what you have here? Stolen art, looted by the Nazis, hidden by a German POW who wanted to preserve it. Exactly. This isn't treasure, Mr. Brennan. This is stolen heritage belonging to families who were murdered or displaced. Each piece represents a theft, a loss, a piece of history torn away. Her voice carried weight, emotion underneath the professional tone. But you're giving these pieces a chance to go home, to be reunited with the families they were stolen from. That matters. David Chen was photographing everything, documenting each item's position and condition. Dr. Strauss examined the safe's contents, the bonds, the project paperclip documents. When she saw those, she went very still. These are classified documents from Operation Paperclip. Johann Schmidt must have been involved somehow, or knew people who were. These need to go to the National Archives. Immediately. They're historically significant and potentially still classified. She looked at Thomas. You could face federal charges for possessing them. I'm willing to turn them over, but I need the Commission's protection first. Official documentation that I discovered these items legally, that I'm cooperating fully. Dr. Strauss pulled out her phone, made a call. She spoke rapidly in what sounded like German, then switched to English. After 10 minutes of conversation, she hung up. The Commission will issue certification of discovery within 24 hours. You'll have legal documentation establishing your role. In exchange, you'll surrender the project paperclip documents to federal authorities and cooperate fully with the restitution process for all artwork. The finder's fee? Standard rate, 10% of appraised value for each piece successfully returned to heirs. Given the quality of what I'm seeing here, you're looking at substantial compensation. But it will take time, months, possibly years for some pieces. She extended her hand. Do we have an agreement? Thomas shook. We do. They spent the rest of the morning documenting everything. David Chen took over 1,000 photographs. Dr. Strauss cataloged each painting, noting artists and approximate dates. She estimated the total value of artwork in the room at $15 million. Thomas's finder's fee would be $1.5 million, assuming successful restitution. More money than he'd ever imagined, enough to restore the manor completely, secure Lily's future, live comfortably for the rest of his life. But it wouldn't come fast, and Richard Ashford wouldn't wait. As if summoned by thought, Thomas's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Yes? Mr. Brennan, this is Sheriff Wade Miller. I need you to come down to my office. There's been a complaint filed against you. Thomas's blood went cold. What kind of complaint? Child endangerment. Richard Ashford claims you're keeping your granddaughter in unsafe conditions. I'm required to investigate. If you don't come in voluntarily, I'll have to send deputies to find you. The world tilted. Thomas looked at Jack, at Dr. Strauss, both watching with concern. I'll come. Give me an hour. He hung up. Jack's face was grim. He's making his move. I need to get Lily somewhere safe before they try to take her. Where? If the sheriff's investigating, they'll check motels, hotels, Dorothy's place. Dr. Strauss interrupted. I have a hotel suite in Portland, 2 bedrooms. Your granddaughter can stay there with David while we handle this. The commission has legal standing. They won't challenge us. It was a lifeline Thomas hadn't expected. He looked at this stranger who'd appeared in his life hours ago and now offered sanctuary. Why would you do this? Because what you're doing matters. Because I've spent 30 years helping families recover what was stolen from them, and I recognize someone trying to do the right thing. She pulled out her phone. I'll call the hotel. Let them know David and Lily are coming. You focus on the sheriff. Once you have legal documentation from my office, Richard Ashford's claims become much harder to pursue. Thomas drove to Dorothy's store, explained the situation. Lily's face went pale when she understood. They want to take me away? They want to try, but Dr. Strauss is going to keep you safe. You'll stay in a nice hotel in Portland with David. He's got a daughter about your age. He showed me pictures. He'll take care of you. What about you? I'll deal with the sheriff, then come get you. Tomorrow at the latest. Lily hugged him fiercely. Don't let them take the house. I won't. I promise. David Chen arrived in a rental car. He seemed kind, patient, showing Lily pictures of his daughter on his phone, talking about the hotel's pool and room service. Lily went with him reluctantly, looking back at Thomas through the car window as they drove away. Thomas felt hollowed out, scraped clean. But there was no time for emotion. He drove to the sheriff's office, a small building behind the courthouse. Sheriff Miller met him in the lobby, expression neutral. Mr. Brennan, thanks for coming in. Let's talk in my office. The office was small, crowded with filing cabinets and boxes. Miller sat behind a desk covered in paperwork and gestured to a chair. Richard Ashford filed a formal complaint this morning. Claims you're living in a condemned structure with a minor child. No heat, no running water, dangerous conditions. That was true a week ago. It's not true now. We've made significant repairs. I'll need to verify that. But there's another issue. Mr. Ashford claims you've been excavating the property without permits, possibly removing historical artifacts illegally. I've been recovering looted World War II art and turning it over to the proper authorities. The Commission for Looted Art in Europe is handling it. They're issuing documentation today. Miller's eyebrows rose. That's not what Ashford said you'd claim. Because Ashford wants the property for himself. He's been trying to buy it for years. Now that I've found something valuable, he's using the legal system to steal it. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth and I can prove it. The commission will verify everything. Miller leaned back, studying Thomas. You know what I see? An old man who inherited a property he couldn't maintain, who brought a child into a dangerous situation, who's in over his head. But you're not wrong about Richard Ashford. He's tried to push through development projects before, bent some rules, made problems for people who got in his way. He pulled out a form. I'm required to inspect the property. If I find it's genuinely unsafe for a minor, I'll have to place her in temporary custody until conditions improve. That's not personal. That's the law. When? Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Be there with documentation from this commission, proof the repairs are real, and we'll see where we stand. Thomas left the sheriff's office feeling like he'd dodged a bullet, but the gun was still pointed at him. He called Dr. Strauss. She confirmed the documentation would be ready by morning, expedited given the circumstances. He called Jack, explained the inspection. We work through the night, make the place look habitable, safe. The kitchen's already good. We focus on that, show them one safe room is enough. They worked until midnight, cleaning, repairing, making the kitchen and servants' quarters presentable. Jack brought in more heaters, checked smoke detectors, secured loose floorboards. By the time they finished, the space looked genuinely livable. Not luxurious, but safe. Thomas collapsed on the makeshift bed, exhausted beyond measure. His phone buzzed. Text from Emma. Called Lily like I promised. She sounds scared. What's happening? He was too tired to explain. He texted back. Long story. She's safe. Call her again tomorrow. She needs to hear your voice. Sleep claimed him hard and fast, dreamless and heavy. When he woke, gray dawn light filtered through the windows. Today would determine everything. Pass inspection, keep Lily, fail, and lose her to the system while Richard Ashford circled like a shark. Sheriff Miller arrived at 9 a.m. exactly, bringing a social worker, a woman in her 40s named Patricia Valdez, who smiled kindly but carried a clipboard like a weapon. They walked through the kitchen, the servants' room, examined the heaters and plumbing and electrical connections Jack had rigged. Miller tested the stove, checked the smoke detectors, looked at the sleeping arrangements. Patricia Valdez asked questions about food, schooling, medical care. Thomas answered honestly, showing receipts from the grocery store, explaining Lily's counselor back home, his plans for enrolling her in Riverside Elementary. After an hour, they conferred quietly. Thomas stood with Jack, barely breathing. Finally, Miller approached. The space is adequate, basic, but safe enough for temporary housing. However, the rest of the structure is condemned if the child enters other areas of the house. She won't. We've explained the boundaries. Patricia Valdez added, I'll need to meet with Lily, assess her emotional state, make sure she feels safe. Can you produce her? She's in Portland with the commission representative. I can have her back here this afternoon. That's acceptable. I'll return at 2 p.m. If everything checks out, temporary custody remains with you. But Mr. Brennan, her voice softened, this isn't a permanent solution. You need to formalize guardianship, get proper documentation. If her mother's situation is as complicated as you say, that could take months. You need a lawyer. I'm working on it. They left. Thomas sagged against the counter. Jack gripped his shoulder. You did it. Bought more time. Not much. Richard won't stop. He'll find another angle. As if on cue, Thomas's phone rang. Richard Ashford. He almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. What do you want? I want to make a final offer, $500,000. Cash. Today. You sign over the property and walk away. No lawsuits, no court battles, no more inspections. Just money and freedom. And the artwork? Becomes part of the estate transfer. Whatever you found stays with the property. So you can claim the finder's fees. Exactly. I'm being generous here, Mr. Brennan. $500,000 is more than most people see in a lifetime. Thomas thought about the hidden room, the $15 million in artwork, the $1.5 million in finder's fees that would be his if he waited. Richard was offering a fraction of the true value, trying to steal the fortune his family had spent decades searching for. No, you're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. He hung up. Jack was watching him with something like admiration. You realize he's going to come at you even harder now. Let him come. I'm not running anymore. The weeks that followed moved with the strange rhythm of war, long stretches of grinding work punctuated by moments of sharp crisis. Thomas and Jack fell into a pattern. Mornings spent documenting the hidden room's contents for Dr. Strauss's team, afternoons devoted to making the manor genuinely habitable. The commission moved faster than expected, authenticating pieces, tracing ownership chains through databases that spanned continents and decades. Each verified painting brought Thomas closer to legitimacy and Richard Ashford closer to desperation. Dorothy's Thursday soup became a war council. She'd recruited half the town without Thomas asking, spreading word that Richard Ashford planned to demolish the manor for condos if he won his legal challenge. Suddenly, Thomas had volunteers, retired contractors who remembered when Riverside was a real community, young couples who couldn't afford Richard's vision of luxury development, teachers who wanted to preserve local history. They came on weekends, bringing tools and casseroles, patching walls and replacing windows, transforming the manor from condemnation to restoration. Patricia Valdez returned twice more, each time noting improvements, each time reminding Thomas that temporary custody was exactly that, temporary. Emma called Lily every evening now, keeping her promise, though the conversations left his granddaughter quiet and withdrawn afterward. The divorce dragged on. Richard Chen's lawyers fought everything. 6 months stretched toward a year. By late May, Thomas received Dr. Strauss's final documentation, official certification from the Commission for Looted Art in Europe, establishing him as legal discoverer of the hidden room's contents. The project paperclip documents had been surrendered to the National Archives, and federal agents had questioned Thomas for 6 hours about how he'd found them, finally accepting that he'd stumbled into history rather than stolen it. The bearer bonds were authenticated, valid, cashable, worth exactly what Jack had calculated. The paintings, 12 in total, were valued at $18 million. Thomas's finder's fees would total $1.8 million once restitution was complete. Richard Ashford's lawsuit collapsed within a week of Thomas presenting the commission's certification. The judge ruled the property transfer legitimate, the deed valid, and suggested Richard's lawyers should have done better research before filing frivolous motions. But Richard didn't slink away defeated. Men who'd spent their entire lives chasing family legends didn't surrender because of one legal setback. The threatening note appeared on Thomas's car windshield the morning after the judge's ruling. "You think you've won, you haven't. June 21st. Watch what happens." Jack read it and swore quietly. He knows about the garden party. Thomas had sent invitations 3 weeks ago to Rebecca, Michael, Emma, to Dorothy and Jack and everyone who'd helped restore the manor, to Dr. Strauss and Marcus Webb. 200 people RSVP'd, yes, including reporters who'd heard about the Nazi art recovery. The party was meant to be celebration and homecoming, a public statement that the Ashford Manor lived again. Now it felt like target practice. "We hire security," Jack insisted. "Real security, not just the sheriff driving by." Thomas used some of Marcus Webb's advance money to hire a firm from Portland. 3 professionals who arrived 2 days before the party and walked the property like Secret Service, noting sight lines and access points in places someone could cause trouble. Their presence should have been reassuring. Instead, it made everything feel more dangerous, like Thomas had escalated a conflict he didn't fully understand. June 20th arrived with golden afternoon light and Thomas's hands shaking as he walked through the transformed manor. The kitchen gleamed, fully functional. The entrance hall had been restored, chandelier replaced, marble floor polished. The library held new books alongside rescued originals. The conservatory, Jack's masterpiece, had been rebuilt with new glass, filled with plants that Dorothy's garden club had donated. It glowed in the evening sun like something from a dream. But the second floor remained closed, roped off with signs explaining ongoing restoration. The third floor was still dangerous, untouched. The manor was half-healed, a work in progress, like Thomas himself. Lily found him standing in the entrance hall, staring at the family photograph from 1980 that now hung in a place of honor. "You okay, Grandpa?" "Nervous. What if they don't come?" "Mom said she'd be here. She promised." Lily's voice carried the careful hope of a child who'd learned promises could break. Aunt Rebecca and Uncle Michael, too. Mom talked to them. Thomas hadn't spoken to Rebecca or Michael since that brief phone conversation months ago. Emma had apparently taken charge, coordinating with her siblings, making plans he wasn't part of. Either they were coming or they weren't. Either they'd forgiven him for disappearing, or they hadn't. Either his work mattered or it didn't. Then we trust that, he managed. And tomorrow, whatever happens, we'll deal with it. That night, Thomas barely slept. At dawn, he was up, checking details with the caterers Dorothy had insisted on hiring, confirming the musicians would arrive by noon, walking the gardens where David Carter's landscaping had created something extraordinary from wilderness. The roses, descended from Victoria's original plantings, were blooming. The fountain ran clear. Lanterns lined every path, ready to be lit at sunset. By 10 a.m., the volunteers started arriving to help with final preparations. By noon, the musicians were setting up under the old oak tree. By 2 p.m., Thomas stood in the kitchen, wearing a suit Dorothy had helped him buy, staring at his reflection in the window and seeing an old man trying to look respectable. 81 years old and terrified that he'd built something beautiful that would stand empty. At 2:30, the first guests arrived. Townspeople Thomas now knew by name, families who'd sent their teenagers to help with painting, elderly couples who remembered when the Ashford Manor had been the social center of Riverside. They filled the gardens with voices and laughter, admiring the transformation, congratulating Thomas on work they'd helped accomplish. At 3, Thomas stood on the front porch with the dinner bell's rope in his hand. Nearly 200 people filled the gardens below. Dorothy stood with the food tables. Jack and Rachel, who'd arrived last week and seemed fragile but present, stood near the conservatory. David and Sophie, visibly pregnant now, held hands by the fountain. Dr. Strauss and Marcus Webb represented the official world that had validated his discovery. But no Rebecca, no Michael, no Emma. Thomas's throat tightened. He'd prepared words, but they felt hollow now. Still, the people below had come. They deserved acknowledgement. He pulled the rope. The bell's sound rang across the valley, and in that moment, Thomas saw 3 cars turning between the stone pillars, driving slowly up the restored driveway. His hands went numb. The bell rope slipped from his fingers. The first car stopped. Sarah, no, Emma, he had to remember her right name, stepped out wearing a blue dress and looking more rested than she had in February. She turned and lifted someone from the back seat. Lily, who shrieked and ran toward the porch. Thomas met her halfway, scooping her up despite his hips' protest, holding her while she wrapped her arms around his neck. You came. Of course I came. This is home. The second car's door opened and Rebecca emerged, elegant in tailored pants and a silk blouse. She walked toward him slowly, and Thomas saw tears on her face. Dad, oh, Dad, what did you do to this place? Fixed it, he whispered, or tried to. The third car's door opened. Michael climbed out, then reached back and lifted a small boy, 3 years old, dark hair, curious eyes. Thomas froze. Dad, this is Henry, your great-grandson. Michael's voice cracked. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I'm sorry for so many things. Thomas set Lily down carefully and approached the boy. Henry watched him with the particular seriousness of children meeting someone important. You're really old. Despite everything, Thomas laughed. I really am. Daddy says you built this whole house. I fixed it, with lots of help. Henry considered this, then held up his arms. Thomas lifted him, lighter than Lily, all energy and warmth, and felt something break apart in his chest. His great-grandson. 3 years of life he'd missed because of pride and distance and fear. Emma appeared beside him. Dad, we need to talk, all of us. After the party, we need to... A car engine roared up the driveway, far too fast. The black Mercedes fishtailed on the gravel and slammed to a stop 20 feet away. Richard Ashford emerged, and he wasn't alone. Vernon Ashford, the Boston cousin, the lawyer, climbed out of the passenger side. 2 more men from the back, same professional muscle from before. The crowd in the gardens had gone silent. Thomas handed Henry to Michael and stepped forward, Jack appearing instantly at his side. Richard, you weren't invited. I'm not here for your party. Richard's face was flushed, his careful composure shattered. I'm here to stop a crime. You've been showing people stolen property, claiming finder's fees for art that belongs to my family. Vernon, tell him. Vernon Ashford pulled out papers. We've filed an emergency injunction. The hidden room contains materials that predate your grandfather's acquisition of this property, making them part of the original Ashford estate. The bearer bonds, the artwork, all of it belongs to the family trust I represent. You've been illegally converting, Dr. Strauss stepped forward from the crowd. I'm Dr. Helena Strauss from the Commission for Looted Art in Europe. The materials in question are authenticated Nazi looted art, which belongs to neither Mr. Brennan nor the Ashford estate. They belong to the heirs of families who were murdered during the Holocaust. Mr. Brennan has full legal standing as discoverer, certified by international law. Your injunction has no merit. She's lying, Richard pointed at Thomas. He paid her off. He found my family's treasure and he's stealing it with fake documentation. That's enough. Sheriff Miller pushed through the crowd and he had 2 deputies with him. Mr. Ashford, you need to leave. This is private property. I'm not leaving until— Yes, you are. Miller's voice carried authority Thomas hadn't heard before. We've been investigating the fire at this property back in February, the one that destroyed the East Wing. Your associate, he gestured at one of Richard's companions, was very helpful once we explained that arson carries 20 years in federal prison. He told us everything. How you hired him to start the fire. How you thought scaring Mr. Brennan would make him sell. Richard's face went white. That's a lie. He's lying. We have recordings. Conversations you had with him setting up the job. Miller pulled out handcuffs. Richard Ashford, you're under arrest for arson, conspiracy, and attempted insurance fraud. You have the right to remain silent. This is insane. I'm a respected businessman. I have lawyers. Then call them from jail. Miller cuffed him while Richard shouted threats and Vernon Ashford tried to invoke legal procedures that meant nothing. The deputies took Richard's companions into custody. Vernon, realizing he had no leverage, backed toward his car, hands raised. I wasn't part of the fire. I'm just the estate lawyer. I was filing legitimate motions. File them from Boston, Miller suggested, and don't come back to Riverside. They dragged Richard away, his expensive shoes scraping gravel, his voice rising in fury that dissolved into something like panic. The Mercedes and police cars disappeared down the driveway, and suddenly the gardens erupted in applause and cheering. Thomas stood shaking, unable to process what had just happened. Dorothy appeared with a flask. Drink, you've earned it. He took a sip, whiskey, smooth and burning, and handed it back. Did that really just happen? Small towns remember their own, and we protect what's worth protecting. She nodded toward the crowd. Now go talk to your children. The rest of us can celebrate without you for a while. Thomas found Rebecca, Michael, and Emma waiting by the conservatory. Lily had attached herself to Emma, while Henry explored the garden paths under Michael's watchful eye. They all stood awkwardly until Rebecca spoke. We should have come sooner. Emma told us what you'd been doing, where you were, what you'd built. We should have dropped everything and come. I should have called more, Thomas countered. Should have tried harder. We all should have tried harder. Michael's voice was quiet. After Mom died, we just drifted and kept drifting. It was easier than dealing with grief. Emma wiped her eyes. I dumped Lily on you when I was falling apart. You were in crisis and I made it worse. I'm so sorry, Dad. Thomas looked at his 3 children, middle-aged, accomplished, carrying their own wounds, and saw not the distance that had grown between them, but the possibility of closing it. I disappeared for 6 months, didn't tell anyone where I was going. Let you think I'd vanished. That's on me. But you built this. Rebecca gestured at the manor, the gardens, the celebration continuing around them. You took a ruin and made it beautiful. You recovered stolen art and gave it back to families who lost everything. You created something that matters. I had help, a lot of help. That's what we're here to offer now, Michael said. Help. We want to invest in finishing the restoration. Make this a real family property. Not just yours, ours. Somewhere we can all come back to. The offer landed like Grace Thomas hadn't known to expect. You don't have to. We want to, Rebecca interrupted. This is our history too. Our grandfather bought this place. Our great-grandmother, Victoria, lived here. And now you've given it life again. Let us be part of that. Thomas pulled them into an embrace and they all held each other while the party continued around them and the sun dropped toward the horizon. Henry came running back, demanding to see the treasure room, and Lily took his hand to lead him on a careful, supervised tour. The evening unfolded in warmth and music and more food than 200 people could eat. Speeches were made, Dorothy praising the community effort, Dr. Strauss explaining the importance of restitution, Marcus Webb announcing the Hodler painting had been returned to descendants in Vienna who wept when they saw it. And then an elderly man approached Thomas, moving slowly with a cane. "Mr. Brennan, I'm Hans Schmidt. Johann Schmidt was my father." Thomas stared. The man was 90 if he was a day, with kind eyes and hands that trembled on his cane. "Your father built the hidden room." "I didn't know until I saw the news coverage. My father wrote letters from America after the war, but I never knew where he was or what he'd done. When he died in 1972, I thought all his secrets died with him." Hans's eyes were wet. "Thank you for honoring his memory, for showing that even in darkness, people could choose kindness." They stood together while the sun set and lanterns were lit along every path, transforming the gardens into something magical. Thomas introduced Hans to his children, to Lily and Henry, to Jack and Dorothy, and everyone who'd helped build this moment. The old German and the old American, sons of enemies who became friends, standing in a house that had survived decades of neglect to become symbol of something better. As night fell completely and the party showed no signs of ending, Thomas slipped away to the library. He pulled out the brass pocket watch, held it up to the lamplight. Still stopped at 3:47, frozen time, footsteps behind him. Rebecca stood in the doorway. "What's that?" "My grandfather's watch, stopped working years ago. I kept meaning to fix it, but never did." He turned it over in his palm. Felt appropriate somehow, like time had stopped for me too. "Are you going to fix it now?" Thomas thought about the last 6 months, the transformation from eviction to restoration, from loneliness to family, from broken to healing, not fixed, not perfect, but moving forward. He wound the watch carefully, feeling the mechanism catch and turn. Tick, tick, tick. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think it's time." Rebecca hugged him from behind, resting her chin on his shoulder. "I love you, Dad. We all do. We always have." "I know that now." They returned to the party together, and Thomas rang the bell one final time, calling everyone to attention. In the lantern light, surrounded by his children and grandchildren and great-grandson, by friends who'd become family in a community that had rallied around him, Thomas Brennan spoke. "This house was dying. I was dying too, in my own way. We saved each other, but it wasn't just me. It was every person here who showed up, who helped, who refused to let something beautiful disappear. That's what community means. That's what family means. Showing up even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." He looked at Rebecca, Michael, Emma. "Thank you for showing up. Thank you for coming home." The party continued past midnight, and when the last guests finally departed, Thomas's family remained. They sat in the restored kitchen drinking coffee, making plans for Christmas, for summer visits, for the years ahead. Lily fell asleep against Emma's shoulder. Henry dozed in Michael's arms. And Thomas, 81 years old with a pocket watch that ticked steadily in his vest, felt something he hadn't felt in longer than he could remember. He felt like he had time. Time to watch his great-grandson grow. Time to rebuild relationships with his children. Time to finish restoring the manor. Time to live instead of merely surviving. Outside, the Ashford Manor stood solid and beautiful under stars that shone over Riverside and Boston and Seattle and Chicago, connecting scattered family across distance. Inside, in a kitchen that glowed with warmth and life, Thomas Brennan closed his eyes and knew he was home. Finally, truly home.